And that's one of the things I envy you about is all your original,
Oh,
you
all the
know,
originals? Yeah. Well,
all the originals.
to be fair, I haven't really played them out almost at all. So,
Yeah, but you got them. You got
well,
them.
okay.
They're recorded. Mine are all in my head. I got like 45 years worth in my head. And I've
Oh,
only recorded one.
well, yeah. And we are going to, well, let's talk about your song because I would like to put it at the end of this interview for people to hear if you don't mind.
Do you have it?
Of course, you sent it to me.
Oh, well, then it explains it. I would love for you to put it at the end of the interview.
Yeah, talk about this. Basically, I've written all these songs over the last 30 years. You wrote one song in 30 years. Talk
Yeah.
about your song.
It's even more than that. Yeah, it was probably 1982. This is the guitar. I still have this, my first guitar and my first piano. But I bought this from Smitto for 35 bucks because he needed a bag of weed. And so I learned I learned how to do this on the moving the chords up like that when you do the D position from an open D, and I learned this, and then I learned all these, and that's really cool, and I like to do it. So I did back then. I just sang the first verse, but it just went. Play it better. I did a half step right there in the original version. It's just simple rock and roll. Yeah? And then I did the first verse by saying, when you and me and tomorrow is a night. And the funny thing is, it's called Tomorrow. This you didn't get the right title with it. The studio tech just tagged it Better Place because I said Better Place in it, but
Uh-huh.
Tomorrow is the night, and I should have told you that, but that's the
Well,
title of the song.
what took you so long? Why did it take you so many years to finish?
Well, I wasn't even looking to record a song, and then a friend of mine he went down with some, and we still to this day don't know. But person just like checks out, and he's a really good musician. He's got great credits. I'm not going to say who it is, but excuse me. But his brothers and I go back a long way, and they grew up as musicians. They asked if I came down and played a couple gigs with him. They were trying to bring him out of his shell, like, and it didn't work. It did work. It didn't work. It didn't work. But I said I was at his house one day and I picked up a guitar and I started playing that thing again. And I said, I have a song, Joey. If we could go to the studio and record this song, you could be the producer. Boy, I told you his name, but and I wanted him to produce it, and then so his brother's a recording engineer and the studio owner. So we made a deal. We'll do this song. He'll be the producer. I'll do it. And I did it for that reason. And so when it came around to the second verse, I needed a second verse. So I wrote the second verse 40 some years later from the first verse. And I added an entirely new segment to the song. In the front, there's a huge intro, spectacular intro. One reason I'm avoiding putting it online, I don't want people thinking my intro. They'll play it in stadiums around the world and I'll get nothing. No, I'm just kidding. But I added the intro on it, then we do the verse, and then we do that, and then I kind of left the rhythm going out to be continued because it's going to lead to the next piece
Yeah.
when I go back in the studio 30 years from now.
Yeah, but you haven't explained the 40-year gap. What kept you from just
Oh,
finishing it?
pretty much being lazy and procrastinating and playing like I've just been playing work working at gigs where I play music, and that's what I like to do. I like being on stage more, I think, but I also think in the studio you don't have to be young and good looking, so I could save that. And if I don't die, we'll put that on later. Or I could be in a country band; they don't care either.
Yeah. So you were just too busy to finish it.
Yeah, too busy on my chart of busyness. Yes,
Yeah.
but if you looked at other people's charts of busyness, they would probably say you had some room here to do it, and then what about this decade? And
Oh,
I agree. There's a time. It's just not a thing that I've always used my music when I play on the piano. I just play it, and it's always been a lot of it. It just evolved from the techniques that I used to teach myself. Like when I would, I used to know, and I did all those. I got to the point where I could play them at lightning speed, and I would play things like that. But I'm not. There's nothing to see here. I was
well, I mean, it's interesting. First of all, before we lose track of the song entirely, what convinced you to finish it? Because obviously, not finishing it was just a no-brainer. I'm just not going to do it. But then you decided to finish it. Why?
Yeah. So when we went in the studio under those rules, and he started and he played the first opening. It's got a little classical, which is this guitar. Also, it sounds beautiful on it. And by the way, I'm not plugging that brand. It's called Kimberly, and I've only seen like two or three more, and they were all horrible. But this, I just happened to get a lucky one.
Yeah.
But it started, and then he came in and played the bass with it. It almost sounds like Rush. It reminds me of Rush when I hear the opening. And that's another thing. You can tell I've been playing cover music for years because I took the bass gun thing out of Steve Miller that I really liked, and Ann Wilson, Nancy Wilson, when she comes in on some song, she does that double strum, like one of those, and I go, oh, I like that. I put that in there, but
Yeah.
I've been playing his music, so I take parts of Led Zeppelin, and not on purpose. It just sounds like that because I've been just listening to music and playing it back all these years. So,
Well,
and
I
then,
just
I think because we wanted to finish it because our fellow that we were talking about kind of backed out again and ended up getting out of the situation. I said, well, I want to at least finish the song so you can
yeah.
hear it, and I want it down before I die. And that's really the reason I want to record any of my songs. They're not to sell. They're not. I mean, I'd be glad if people buy, but they're just
To get them done.
yeah, they'll just vanish. They're all
Right.
here.
Absolutely. I mean, at the very least, you should just record them all into a tape recorder just so there's some demo version of them out there.
Yes, that much
That's
I
oh,
have
you
that.
you have that. Okay, so they exist on some recorded form.
Yes, they have
Okay.
old cassettes and on a new device. They're on my voice recorder and
A-
in the cloud. We can trust
Okay.
the cloud.
And so what I did was I didn't actually produce most of my songs. I just recorded them just like that, and then that's what I put up on the internet. I said, "Here I am." I called them my unwashed demos, and there they
And
are.
then I'm gonna do that
You should.
because that was
Why not?
well. That's just the thing. When I get in the studio and I start playing around with the production, I go, wait a second. You know what would be really cool here?
But you could do both. You could do both.
Yeah, and you can
Yeah.
back it up with we can have the big flourishy keyboard that backs up a really nice keyboard. You know what I mean? And you can have those things. And I don't need the forehand because to be honest, I mean, I've been in music for a long time, and obviously I know multi-track recording. But when I was a kid teaching myself to play the piano, my brother was listening to Emerson, Lake and Palmer, Brain Salad Surgery, and Rick Wakeman's Journey to the Center of the Earth, and all these. And then it comes on with Elton John's Goodbye Yellow Brick Road album, and I wasn't a big Billy Joel fan. I think just because my brother wasn't. I don't have anything against him. It's just that
Right.
I don't know a lot of Billy Joel songs as compared to how many Elton John songs I know.
Sure.
But I know a few, and the ones I like them.
To
And
be
I've
fair, I
always
think in terms of doing piano, I did an Elton John sing along a couple years ago where I took, yeah, about 12 Elton John songs and performed them. And I found doing a deep dive into Elton John that actually, in terms of audience, they're more fun. I mean, if you're a Billy Joel fan, the Billy Joel songs are all amazing. But in terms of listening and just playing, the Elton John songs are much more approachable and friendly.
yeah, I think that's a very good point. Well made. Yeah, because if you know Vienna by Billy Joel and you love it, you're going to be at the concert loving it. And I don't know what percentage of other people that don't know it not loving it as much.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
if you're not a musician, you know how it is. I mean, I get that all the time. My favorite band is Yes, favorite band of all time.
Okay.
I love
That's
Yes.
a good band.
Yes, Led Zeppelin, and then it starts to change there. Third, fourth.
I got a bit of
But the,
Yes trivia for you since you're such a Yes fan. Do you like the 90125 album?
I do.
Okay, So you know that song "Owner of a Lonely Heart,"
Yes.
and you know that line, "Watch it now, the eagle in the sky."
Yeah.
If you listen carefully, right after you hear that line, you'll hear a gunshot. The producer was taking a piss on the song and he put a gunshot to shoot down the eagle in the sky. So if you listen to that song, you'll hear a gunshot shooting down the
No
eagle in the
kidding.
sky. It's true.
Oh, I didn't know that. I gotta watch it.
Yeah.
And that's where that little keyboard comes. What's the eagle in the sky? And then there's like that. So it might be right in there. You saying?
You'll hear it. It's just this little gunshot.
Oh, I definitely will listen for that.
And
I love
Trevor
that
Horn
song.
stuck that in there. Yeah. So I thought that was funny. I did a little deep dive into Yes a little while ago. So
What's funny about the progressive people that I grew up with, listening to Rush and Jethro Tull, and in their later years, as I see them in interviews now, they're nothing like the dark, mystical figures that lurk in the background in the shadows and come out royally. They're
yeah.
funny guys. There's some funny, like, uh, who's I just saw? Oh, Jethro Tull, Ian Anderson. He's one of the funniest people. Just like I can't relate anything now, but it was kind of like it's relieving when you see Rick Wakeman couldn't come up when you find out because he was leaning over taking a big bite out of a sandwich when you hear those John Anderson and I am involved with um I have been involved in the last 3 years ago putting a classic rock band together with
Hmm.
one of the biggest Pittsburgh concert guys and he's actually got a Netflix special. It's very interesting.
Yeah.
I just watched it. In fact, if I was still in the band, I'd be in the special.
Are you
But
still you're in
yeah,
Pittsburgh now?
yeah, I'm in Pittsburgh this week, but
And that's where I met you. Or did you grow up in Pittsburgh?
yeah, this is my hometown.
So I don't know if you knew this about Pittsburgh, but in terms of the jazz scene, it's famous for having a very nurturing jazz scene. Like a lot of jazz musicians took care of each other and brought each other up. Pittsburgh is famous for this in jazz, much more than New
Yeah.
York City, much more than Atlanta. And I wondered if you experienced that kind of, if there was any kind of bleed over effect into where you were. Did you feel that nurturing around you in your area?
I honestly can say I probably didn't because that was that was like another world to me when I grew up in Pittsburgh. I grew up in north of Pittsburgh in the old steel towns in Ambridge and up Ambridge and Aliquippa, which is farther north. And the jazz scene that you're talking about, I think was around the hill, and I remember I know people. Let's say that I know a lot of the guys that played that, and I wasn't in the same like group of we didn't hang out that sort of thing. Uh, the people that came from my area would have been heard of, but I met a guy named Mike. No, I can't remember his. But he's one of these jazz trumpet players as we speak, and I met him in the '90s, and Kenny Blake also. I met Kenny Blake. He's a great sax player. So I wasn't involved with them, but I know of them, and we've certainly heard of them.
You misunderstood. I wasn't asking you about your involvement with the jazz scene. I was wondering if the rock scene was as nurturing as the jazz scene in
Oh,
Pittsburgh.
I see what you're saying. Yes, yes, and no. There was a time there in the late '70s and the early '80s. There was like almost a spotlight was being drawn on the area, but again, we have a guy in town. His name is Donnie Iris, and he had a big hit in the '70s called
Yeah,
Aaliyah. And
I
that's
know
a
that. I know
great,
that.
that's
Yeah.
darn hardcore rock, just cracking vocals. He does all the vocals in the studio, and that was my about my song. Just as a scroll, written by, done by. I did everything on that, but that's what he does, and he had all these musicians in there, and he had the best musicians of the time, and that was a big hit. And he had another hit in the early '80s with "Love Will Rock You,"
Yeah.
and then there's
Love is like a rock, I think you mean.
"Love Is Like a Rock." That's what right. That's what it's called. "Love Is Like a Rock." Great song, great guy. And I remember my brother told me, he goes, he's in the restaurant now. I said, who's in the restaurant? He said, Donnie Iris. So what are you talking about? Because I was living in West Virginia at the time, playing in a band. I was in a musicians union, believe it or not. And I was playing in a band in West Virginia. My brother tells me we had just learned that song to play. It was a big hit, at the
Right.
time. It was a popular song. And then he tells me he's in the restaurant up in Chippewa. They stopped in at Beaver Falls. They stop in and after the show on their way home, and they always stop in my brother's pizza restaurant and get food. And that's how I met these people. It had nothing to do with music.
Yeah. Okay.
But ever since then, he said, "Hey, I have a brother who's really not amounting to anything, but he'd like to try to play keyboards in a band. Do you think you could help him out?" And so they did. They got me gigs,
Mm.
and they got me quite a good gig too. I said,
That's
"Well,
nice.
Rob Parisi from Wild Cherry needs a keyboard player." And I was like, "You mean Wild Cherry? You mean play that funky music? That Wild Cherry?" And he said, "Yeah." I
So
said,
you were in
"Oh,
that band?
yeah." Not in any recordings. You won't have heard me, but
Right.
yeah, I did the local tour with that band.
That's great. So when you were a kid, what was your aspiration? Did you want to be a keyboard player basically from four?
Yeah, I would say when I started hearing the Emerson, Lake and Palmer music, I almost quit. I almost said, "Never mind," because I didn't realize how involved. But I never wanted to be. And to be fair, I would have never. That's just my personality because I'm the youngest of five senior citizens that we have now. And when they were younger, this piano was given to us by a neighbor because they were moving. That's where these pianos usually go. Somebody throws them out; they can't take them. And so they gave it to and my oldest sister took lessons on this, and then my next brothers are twins. They both took lessons on this, and then my sister that's older than me, she took lessons, and none of them really took to it, but they all took lessons from nuns at Catholic school. So they'll. I just want to say they tend to, nothing religious, but they tend to take the fun out of things. And so by
Yeah,
the
you
time
can't
they
use your left hand. You're not allowed to use your left hand.
see, I don't even because that's what I'm saying. By the time they got to me, they're like, "Does he lessons?" And I was already playing on my own, and I think I did it out of spite because I could hear my sister if she was playing. I could figure that out, but she's going, so I would get up, I would wait until she was done with her practice, and then I would smugly go over and play it right, and then she would come over and tell me my timing was wrong. I think that's why I played
Yeah.
the piano, despite my sister.
Yeah.
So
But you didn't, but when did you decide? Did you go to college?
no, I went to. That's funny. This one thing leads to another here. So I was trying to make it as a musician, and some of the bands we got critical acclaim. It's a band called Dorian Spector, but we were still a cover band, but we were like a big hair band in the '80s, and I had give like to the point where I got to get another job. So I went to the Art Institute in Pittsburgh. Like my father said, "Oh, you're not going to be a musician; you're going to be an artist. That's better." So anyway, but I went to learn graphic design, and I learned the last school of classic graphic design where you use exactos and peeled away all this stuff and learned how to do all that. And I got a job at a sign company. And guess what? One of the guys comes in and goes, "Hey, this is a new place going in there. They want signs." And the guy is looking for piano players. You used to play in a band, didn't you? And I said, "Yeah, I still do play in a band." He goes, "Why don't you go down there and audition? And then maybe we'll get the contract." And that's what happened. I went down there, and that's where I met Michael Williams that day. But I couldn't play one song from start to finish. But that's it. It all comes back in very weird ways. But I never decided. At one point, I remember being in my late 20s when this happened, and I decided I'm going to make a career out of being a musician. You know, of being able to play, being able to support myself, being able to support a family, which I did. And then I never got to like I want to be famous someday. I don't think I ever really did that more than anyone else does. Where you might like sit and think about it when you're a kid. Back then, you go, "Oh, this. If I was on Johnny Carson, I'd say this," but not really. It's never been a driving thing for me.
Yeah. Which is why probably you were able to make a living at it.
And that's why I liked it. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's because I'm physically performing the songs all the time.
Yeah.
I put in hours on a regular week. I'm off this week. And then my wife says, "Why are you off this week?" But anyway, I'm off this week, and I usually when I'm working, I don't rehearse much because on a work night you play more than 3 hours on any given night,
Yeah.
and sometimes they're doing these suicide gigs where they put two guys on stage from 8 to 12,
Yeah.
and you can get up and while the other guy's playing, and trust me, I could do 6 hours on my head at this point, but it's still, try to be entertaining. I always say that. I say that on stage when things fail. So you try to be entertaining for 3 hours. It's not easy.
I remember you saying that. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's hard.